Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jason Gregerson. In this video we're going to show you how to work with data using Mathematica. The idea is we're going to look at two different types of using data in Mathematica. Internal data that Mathematica already has built in and fully curated for us. And then we'll also learn how to work with external sources of data by not only exporting our data but also importing other sources of data. So to start with, let's look at that internal data. So the idea is Mathematica has all these kind of data sets built in. We're going to look at one called Planadata to kind of learn the structure of the data sets. So we'll start by typing the command to access the data, and it is planet data. And you can imagine that the other data sets have similar structure. So if we want to find out information about weather, the command will be weather data, finances, financial data, so on and so forth. So the command is planet data, and we're just going to leave the argument of planet data empty. And when we do that and we run that cell, the result will be all the members of this data set. So in this case, we'll get a list of all the planets. Now you can imagine that if we had other data sets, this members list might be quite a bit bigger. For instance, country data will have a lot more members than planet data. So that's how we can see the members of planet data. In fact, in this case, I'm going to store that result of all the members to the command planet. Now the next thing we can do is say, what can we learn about all these members? Well, in general, if I look at the data set and I type in the command properties in quotation marks, what that will give me is all the properties that I can learn about for the different members. So here you can see all the information we learn about each one of the different members. The age, the alphanumeric number, the altitude, so on and so forth about all of these planets. Now not all the information will be present for all of the members, but for the most part it's a lot of information. So for instance, I see gravity here. So now if I want, I could start a new command that would be planet data, and I would type in one specific member, for instance Earth, in quotation marks, and then one specific property also in quotation marks, and here would be gravity. And if I run that, it will get that current data value for me. So I like to find out all of the gravities of the different planets, so I can actually put in my stored list here. And now I can generate the gravities of the different planets. So it's really an interesting way for me to check through all these different data sets and get interesting information. So here I found gravity. Maybe I can store that to the value of g. And then actually if I wanted to search something else here, let's just copy that whole thing and look at a different one. So now maybe let's look at the mass of each planet as well. And we'll store that to the name m. So now I have these two separate data sets. Now one thing I like to do with my data once I have it in Mathematica is use all Mathematica's tools to explore these different data sets. So if I want to visualize the values for planet data, I could just do what I have done in previous units, look at a bar chart. What is a bar chart of the information G here? So now I have all of that data charted, and I can use all the options of bar chart that I might be interested in. For instance, I want to know which planets are which, so I might use the command chart labels, and then I could put in my stored value of planet. And so now I've labeled all these values in here. And so I could do the same thing I want with my other data set. These would be the associated masses. I can really compare my two results. Now sometimes it might happen that these names at the bottom of the charts don't actually fit in their little window. So there are other ways where I can display those names as well. For instance, instead of using chart label, I could use chart legends like that. And if I run that, you'll see that it creates a legend for my bar chart. Now this one doesn't help very much because they all have the same colors. So maybe if I'm using chart legends, I might also want to use chart styles and make that guy pastel. Now if I add those options, now I get this color-coded chart. So all these different ways I can bring in data and then visualize my data away. And then the great thing about that is I can explore my data using the mathematical tools that are already built into Mathematica. For instance, when I look at these two charts, I might see that there might be a relationship between some of these guys. I notice that Jupiter has the biggest mass and Jupiter has the strongest gravity. And maybe there's a relationship here. Now, in a statistical course, you might learn about something called correlation and how to calculate the correlations by hand at two different data sets. But in Mathematica, we can just type in correlation, and sure enough, it is a command, and really just compare those two values here. So I find that these two things are highly correlated. So the purpose of that isn't to teach you here how to use the command correlation, but rather just to show you that when you bring data into Mathematica, you get all that computation that we can do basically for free. Okay, so the one we've been playing here is planet data. Maybe planets aren't your thing, but if I scroll down here a little bit and get to other data sets, what other curated data sets does Mathematica have built in? How about city data, country data, element data, weather data, word data, financial data, so on and so forth. There are so many data sets that are built in, and they're really just kind of neat to explore and to play with. So I encourage you to explore some of these data sets. Now, of course, it doesn't have all the data that we're going to want to play with, so we know how to work with outside data by taking the data we have and exporting it, and then also importing other data. So let's look at exporting and importing. So exporting data. The command to export data is export, and the general format is the file name that we'd like to export the data to, and then the list of data to be exported. Now, the trickiest thing with exporting data is just getting it away from the Mathematica format. For instance, we have stored the value planet, but when I run that, I get these orange boxes that really describe what these are. As you can see below my hovered on answer over there, it's storing not just the name, but actually the entity, the mathematical object it is in Mathematica. I don't really want that here. So what I might want to do instead to get just the names is actually go back to my planet data, and sure enough, one of the things I could find out about all the planets is what their name is. Right, so now I can just get the names of all the planets, and then maybe I'll restore this to actually the named planets. Now I have that one. But I have the same problem with my other data sets as well. We have G for all the gravities, but you notice these are not just numbers, but they're actually numbers and a unit of measure as well. Now we've already seen how to work with lists of object, so I could take the first element of this big list, now it'd be the first value, but Mathematica is going to treat that individual object as also a list of two values. One is the number, one is the unit. So if I say not only do I want the first element, but just the first part of that, then I can get just the number. So what I want is really all of just the numbers. So I have that for gravity, and I actually can do the same thing for my masses. So I will use that same structure to generate just the number value for the masses. And then I have my value of planets. So now what I can do is just kind of organize them by putting them all into one big list like this. And so here I have my new data set. So I'm actually going to store that new kind of more curated data to the name new data. And then this is the thing that I want to export. So sure enough, I'll use the command export. And the first thing is the name. Well, I'm going to have a location on my computer, the name of the file, and the extension of the file. Now the easiest way for me to do this is actually to go up here into insert, and I can insert a file path, and then I can just figure out where I want this object to be. I'm going to put it on my desktop, and I'm just going to grab any file that's on my desktop. Doesn't really matter what it is, because that will give me the file path that I need. And then all I have to do is change the name and the extension at the end. I want to store my data to the name test data, and I want this to be an Excel file. So I'll do XLSX for my Excel file. So that's the name of my file, and now I have to tell the data that I want to export to that name, and that will be new data. So now when I run this, it's going to create that Excel sheet on my desktop. So now it's done. Now I can minimize my screen, and sure enough, there's my file test data. If I open that file, I can see all the values that I had exported. All right, so now I know how to export my data. What about importing new data? Well, to import new data, I can use the command import. And so the general structure is just import and then put in the name of the file you'd like to import. So once again, we'll be able to use that file path idea to get the file name that we need to import. And so we're going to do that. The file that we're going to import is the one that we just exported. We want to be able to import that data and then use our list manipulations to extract all the information we can about just Earth. All right, so what is that going to look like? Well, first we'll type the import command. So import is the command. And once again, I'll go to insert file path, and then I'll just search for the file that I want to import. In this case, it's going to be my test data. There it is. So it's going to put in that file path. And I will just close this, and I will run this cell. Here's the data that I wanted to import. However, the data is a little bit different than the data I exported. It's a subtle little difference, but here I can say I have one big list of all the different planets and then all the different gravities and so on. But here I have three curly brackets out here. Now the reason for this is because when I exported this to Excel, it created a sheet in Excel. And now when I'm importing it, the first list object is actually the first sheet. So it's really a list of one element, just the sheet. Now I actually don't really want this. I'll take my information and I will store it to data. But then when I want to use it, I don't want to have that first kind of arbitrary outside parentheses. So what I will do is extract the first element of data, and that should kind of take away those outside set of curly brackets. And then I'm just going to store this to, well, to data again. I can actually overwrite that name just pulling off that first set of brackets. All right, so now I have the data structured in a way that I can manipulate it. Now what I want to do is get the information about Earth. So I can look and find out Earth. I could kind of explore to get that if I want. So if I have my new set data, I could say, what's the first element of my data set? And it would be the list of names here. And so then maybe I want the third component of that. Well, that would be Earth. Now I actually want Earth and the information about Earth from the other rows. So in that case, I don't want just the name. I want all of the row information. And so now I have all the information about Earth. Another way I could kind of pull out that data, if I'm more of a visual person, is I could just use table form to kind of get a better look at what the data might look like. So if I use table form to data, now I get this table structure. I can say, well, the information I want is all of the rows in the third column. And that's what my list structure releases here. The first value are rows. The second one is column. I want the information from all the rows and for the third column. Okay, so what have we been able to do so far? We've been able to use Mathematica's curated data to learn information. We've also been able to export and import Excel files and play with them. All right, that concludes this instruction. Thank you.